Me at this presentation is how 30 years ago, how antediluvian it was. There was nothing around. In 1983, when I was working as a social worker in Arlington, there were nothing for homeless people in Maryland, D.C., or Virginia. And we had people who were evicted because of their behavior or their mental illness, and they had no place to go. We had one woman who was here from the Midwest. She had decided that she was in love with Senator Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, and as soon as he would meet her, he would fall in love with her. And she would constantly go to Congress every day, and they would kick her out. And finally, her landlady kicked her out. And we had no place to send her. We got in touch with her family in the Midwest. And remember, 30 years ago, in those days, it was the days of, I forgot what it was called. The attitude of parents to mentally ill children. Tough love.
Oh, tough love.
The same way as Hinckley's parents put him out on the highway and said, go. And in those days, the family didn't want to have anything to do with them. So we had heard of a church in D.C. called Luther Place Memorial Church on 13th Street Northwest that did have an overnight shelter for women. And that's where we would send our people. Subsequently, the following year, my husband and I built a house in D.C. to be within walking distance of Addis, Israel. So I quit my job and I decided I wanted to be involved in what's happened in D.C. and I wanted to work with homeless people. So I arranged an interview with Reverend Steinbrook at Luther Place Church. And he said he would be wonderful if I could recruit volunteers from Addis, Israel to staff the shelter one night a week. That's like from 5 to 10 or 11 at night. And the women would go to sleep. And so I came back to Addis, Israel, and remember, 30 years ago, Addis, Israel had no social action committee. And what was I to do? Well, some of the clergy were a very big help. You remember Rabbi Lisfield? He would help me. He would have me speak to people in his classes. He'd refer people to me. And Rabbi Avis Miller was a great help with her bat mitzvah class. I saw Rabbi Miller at a rabbinical assembly. There was a party here at Addis, and we talked about the good old days, and she reminded me, in 1983, she was new. It was the first time she was running a Yom Kippur service, and she gave a sermon, which I have part of if anybody wants to see it, about homelessness. And I spoke to her, and she said she would let me speak to her bat mitzvah class. And I got a lot of volunteers there. And then she came with her bat mitzvah class to Luther Place Church for them to look the shelter over, and then I got more volunteers. So Addis, Israel had a Wednesday night staffing every week. We also would cook dinner once a month and bring it, which is something that is still done at Addis, Israel until this day. There's a group that cooks one day a month and brings it to the shelter. And remember, in those days, 30 years ago, 14th Street was a very difficult situation. We would try to drive at least two of us together because we had to park our car and at 11 o'clock at night go out with our car and go home. And I was asked one night if I would stay overnight, because they had one or two people who stayed overnight to help. And I said yes. It was a Saturday night. And my husband, Bill, felt that it was not too safe for me to go and leave my car. So he drove me and picked me up the next morning. And at 7:30 in the morning, he's parked across the street from the church. And somebody knocks on his window. Puts the window down. This gorgeous young girl, she might have been 19 years old, in red hot pants and a tight sweater, and she said, "Am I the one you're looking for?" And then we knew what that neighborhood was like in those days.
He said no, of course. But.
It disappeared for about an hour.
As far as Elaine knows,
Yes, we know he said no because I was coming right out. And unto this day, Addis Israel does help out with Luther Place across the street. It's called N Street Village. At the time, all they had was a doctor one day a week, but now there are townhouses that house women overnight, etc. So they've come a long way. And I was in touch with Reverend Steinbrück. I am until this day. And then after we did this, about 2 or 3 years, one day Reverend Steinbrück came here. We had Addis Israel by then was sort of open-minded to discussing homelessness. And we had a program, and Reverend Steinbrück challenged Addis Israel to open up a group home for homeless women. Mm-hmm. When we said yes, we would think about it. He suggested the name. Reverend Steinbrück said, call it Anne Frank House, because Anne Frank was sort of homeless. And the minute he said it, we thought it would catch. And the congregation has allowed us to have our contributions and all our mail come here. And it's important because when people give a contribution to Anne Frank House, care of Addis Israel congregation, it's a help. So we thank the congregation for that unto this day. And so a group of us started out to form the Anne Frank House. First of all, we needed some seed money, which we didn't have. So my husband, Bill, sold part of his baseball card collection. And that's how we got seed money. And forever, we're thankful that that was the best thing about his baseball card collection. It started Anne Frank House. And a group of us, there was a subgroup that started to look for a house. We had volunteers all along who were not necessarily Addis Israel members and were not necessarily Jewish. There were people who were interested in homelessness. And one of our first president's husband was a lawyer, and he did all the legal work because we needed to have a, forgot what it's called, not 401k, but whatever it is,
501c3.
Say that again?
501c3.
Right, 501c3. And and then we looked for a house. And we found a house on 1st Street Northwest between B and W Street, a few blocks from Children's Hospital. And we had trouble getting insurance. So my husband's business insurance agent, who was not a member of Addis Israel and not Jewish, got it for us because he was interested in homeless, and he used some protexia to get it for us. And he subsequently became a board member of Anne Frank House. And we've had a number of board members who were not necessarily Addis Israel members.
Do you remember his name by any chance?
No.
Bill, was it Bill something?
Yeah, but I don't remember. I mean, maybe I can ask Molly Shuckett if she has old minutes. She may have his name.
His archives.
I don't have anything anymore.
I have
It's
some
all-
archives at my house.
You might have his
I
name.
probably do.
Because he was a board member
I
for
remember.
3 years.
Yeah.
And not only the two clergy that I mentioned, but when Rabbi Wolber came in 1986 to Addis Israel, he was a tremendous help because he would have members and new members who would be interviewed with him, and if he found that they were interested, he'd refer them to me. One of them is Alice Burton, and so she's still stuck with us for a long time. So I'm thankful that the clergy were helpful because there was no social action committee.
He was very helpful. I went to
He was.
him shortly. We had belonged to a different synagogue and moved over here to Addis, a group of people. And I was not necessarily a leader in the movement of this group of friends who moved here. So I went to Jeff Wolberg, and he knew about the situation, and I said, I'm not a person who is very comfortable in large groups, and I don't really know how to figure out where I belong in this. I've been active interfere with Israel, and he said, call Elaine Kremens. I am just the place for you.
And it was wonderful that we had these wonderful volunteers. So we found the house and we rented the house. We had 4 homeless women living there, plus a 5th homeless woman who was in much better shape, and she turned out to be the house mother. But the one thing I want to, house mother, she was Pat.
She was sort of like the wicked stepmother.
Exactly. We thought she was in better shape than she was. But that leads me into the main thing I want to make clear here tonight, that Reverend and Mrs. Steinbrook, Ernest Steinbrook, was very, very active also with the homeless women. And they made a recommendation that for each resident that we had, even though there was a case management agency, at the time it was
Lutheran
Social Services, that each resident should have a liaison from Anne Frank's house. That was the best recommendation we ever had, and it's been a model until today. Those of you who are sitting here who are our liaisons, because not always does the caseworker, because she or he may have a large contingent of clients, can keep an eye, but we had our liaisons notice when our clients weren't doing well, when they weren't taking their medication, when they were causing trouble, and we had our people help the, not only the case manager, but help the resident to straighten out before they fell off the wagon. And so until today, all of you know, because we have a report every time we have a meeting, how our clients are doing. So I will thank Ernest Steinbrook constantly for that. I still keep in touch with the Steinbrooks. He retired from Luther Place and moved to Lewis, Delaware, and whenever I'm at the beach, I visit them. They're wonderful. He's just not doing too well. He's not feeling too well. He emailed me recently that he isn't driving, and then I heard he wasn't well, so I'll find out. But we had a 20th anniversary celebration here at Addis Israel, and Reverend Steinbrook was here. So he and Erna are a background, and they're constantly asking me what's happening and what's new with Anne Frank House. The other thing I want to remind you of is that because we were the first congregation in D.C. to have a group home, we mentored other congregations. We mentored Washington Hebrew, Temple Sinai, and Temple Micah. And they still have their group homes.
Elaine, you got
Okay,
more?
just one thing.
Okay.
We lost our lease in 1986, and then we started to rent individual apartments, and David will tell us more about the individual apartments.
We are honored and fortunate